Hey everyone, my name is Chris Green. Today's video is all about the acoustic guitar. I want you to be able to take your acoustic guitar tracks from sounding kind of like this to sounding more like this. When it comes to getting a really good acoustic guitar tone, it's going to come down to how you record and how you mix. I want to make things as easy as possible in this video, so I'm choosing to record the acoustic guitar today with my Shure SM57. This SM57 is easily bought for under $100 if you need to. It's going straight into my audio interface. You really don't have to have anything fancy like an external preamp or any compression going on the way in. I'm going to keep it as easy as possible. In Presonus Studio One, I'm using the stock plugins, which you can find in any sort of DAW out there. If you're using Logic, Pro Tools, Ableton Live, as long as you have an EQ, a compressor, and some sort of reverb plugin would be great. You can get the sounds that I'm getting in this video. So with that being said, let's jump into Presonus Studio One. I've got a track loaded. I want to show you how I record my acoustic guitar, and then we'll go from there. First, I want to introduce you to my acoustic guitar. This is a Martin OM21. It's an orchestra model, basically meaning it's a little bit smaller than the standard sized acoustic guitars. Later, we're going to see in this video when I go to EQ, it's really not going to matter what kind of size guitar you're using. If you have a giant dreadnought or any guitar that's putting out a lot of low end, we're going to address that in the video as well. The main thing is I'm going to aim my Shure SM57 for this chunk of wood right here just above the neck. So mine goes up to about the 12th fret right here. I'd say about the 15th fret or so is where the wood starts. I want to aim right for the middle. Don't put the microphone right on the sound hole. It's going to have a lot of low end buildup, almost like a kick drum would have. And as you'll see, when we get to EQing it, we want to roll off that low end anyway. So that's where I'm aiming. Another thing is very important, especially if you're using one of these Kaiser capos, make sure you are in tune. So when you put a capo on an instrument like this, it can definitely mess with your tuning, especially if you don't have really good setup on your acoustic guitar. Just make sure you have a tuner nearby. I don't ever really record the DI out of my acoustic guitar. It does have a good sounding DI for when I'm playing live, but at home, I'm just gonna take the Shure SM57. I'm gonna use my hands about like this. This is about maybe 4 or 5 inches or so. And I want that amount of distance between the microphone and the guitar. It's not really about picking up the sound of this room. I just want to be far enough away from the acoustic guitar that if I'm strumming hard or if I'm lightly picking, you're not getting as much dynamic range from me being super close to the microphone. I want to be about that far away. So I'm going to do like this with my guitar. I'm going to point it straight at the capsule on my Shure SM57. Like I said earlier, the SM57 is going into my RME Babyface Pro, which is my USB interface. I've got a pair of headphones. Let's record some acoustic guitar in Presonus Studio One, and then we'll get to mixing. The other thing I want to mention is I'm using these prime tone picks from Dunlop. They also are dramatically going to affect the sound of your acoustic guitar. That brilliance and bright crispiness that we like from acoustic guitars is going to come from playing with a pick. So play with a pick when you can. If you're doing finger picking, that's fine. You just might need to boost some treble later on. Now these primetone picks are in the description of this video. I've got an Amazon influencer page set up, so pretty much all the stuff I have in my studio, you can find links in the description. As you can see, I've got quite an aggressive dynamic section of acoustic guitar. I wanted to aggressively strum at the guitar and then have a section where I was doing more light picking. I'm gonna show you the things that you would need to change depending on what section you're dealing with. Ideally, when you're recording a song or you're recording a track, you can take time to record some of the more aggressive sections of the song and then create a new track if you're doing any sort of picking, so that way you can treat each one independent. So my first plugin I'm using on the acoustic guitar track has to do with gain staging. Gain staging is basically the process we want to make everything pretty much the same level. Ideally, when I'm recording, I want my tracks to be around -18 on the meter, if possible. In Presonus Studio One, they have some pretty interactive meters. You can look anywhere between -12 and -24 when you're seeing some of those peaks. And then there's this horizontal line that kind of floats, and that's kind of like the average or the RMS. I usually want that to be floating around -18. I'm okay with the peaks going above -18, but obviously we don't want to be clipping. So it's essentially just a gain plugin we have loaded. Most DAWs are going to have this somewhere on their system. I'm just adding about 6.5 decibels of gain so that I get a louder level in the recording. So my next plugin after we've gain staged is an EQ plugin. Presonus Studio One calls theirs Pro EQ. You can use any EQ plugin that you happen to have. Main things I want to do are cut a bunch of the boomy low end. I want to carve out some of the muddiness of the acoustic guitar, and then I want to brighten it up by boosting some of the high end. As you can see, I've got a low cut filter somewhere around 182 Hertz. This will really just depend again on what size acoustic guitar you're recording with. Something like a Dreadnought, something like a larger kind of stadium sized acoustic guitar will have a lot more low end. Now, it's not fun or doesn't feel fun when you're cutting out all of that low end. Especially as a guitar player, our egos get in the way. But whenever you're recording drums and bass guitar, you're going to actually have to carve out more and more of that acoustic guitar tone if you want it to blend in with the rest of the tracks. So if I kept all of the low end in, that might be suitable if we're doing something like a singer-songwriter, something that's like a really soft ballad. I may not need this low cut filter at all, or I could at least put the low cut filter around 50 Hertz instead of 182. But as it is, I have it about 182 Hertz. And then the next area is I'm carving out some of the muddiness on the acoustic guitar. So that's right around 458, 450, 500 Hertz. That's going to be kind of a mud region. You'll be able to hear these frequencies in just a second. I'm cutting out just about 6 decibels or so of that. And then up on the high end, I'm using what's called a high shelf to basically boost around 8K. This is kind of like our air, or we're kind of giving some excitement to the acoustic guitar track. Let me create a loop region here, and we will just listen to the EQ off, and then I'll turn the EQ on, and then I'll boost some of the frequencies so you can hear across the spectrum what is it we're actually cutting out and what are we boosting. So here it is with no EQ. And here it is with EQ. Now to you that may sound really thin, but trust me, as soon as you start adding male or female vocals, as soon as you start adding more and more instruments, you're going to want to have that stuff carved out. Here is, I'm going to boost the yellow band. This is that 450 to 500 Hertz region. You're going to hear some of the honkiness. This is what we're cutting. Here is the high end. This is kind of the shelf that we're boosting. I'm going to over boost it so you can hear exactly what we're boosting. All right, it's pretty good. So again, that's the high shelf giving us some more air. I'm using a dynamic Shure SM57 with these. You're going to boost some more high end. If you are using something like the Rode NT2A, any large diaphragm condenser, you may not have to do the shelf because these often have a lot more high end presence than the dynamic microphones do. That's going to depend on your microphone. Now again, from this EQ, how can you adjust it for your settings? I think I'm safe to say 450 to 500 Hertz, you are going to want to make some sort of cut because that's going to be the mud region for just about all acoustic guitars. The low cut filter, you need to adjust that based on your own specific acoustic. If your acoustic sounds really full, like a kick drum, and it's almost too satisfying, it might be too much of a good thing, so adjust that to your needs. The very next setting is a compressor. Now this compressor plugin is just stock from Presonus Studio One. Let's take a listen to it before, and then I'll turn on the compressor. Here it is on. So some of the settings that you may want to copy over from this compressor are the ratio. I'm using a 4:1 ratio. If this is your only instance of compression, go ahead and put it with 4:1. You might could do 3:1 if you're looking for a less dramatic effect. Again, if this is going to be a song with drums, bass guitar, electric guitar, the more tracks you have in your song, you might need to use more compression, especially for an acoustic guitar to stand up and out. So I put this one at 4:1. I've got an attack time of 10 milliseconds, a release time of 20 milliseconds, and I'm adding about 3.6 decibels of makeup gain. The thing that's going to change depending on what your recording situation is the threshold. Don't copy my threshold settings. You need to adjust your threshold so that when the compressor is active, it's active on the most loud or explosive sections of your recording. So you'll notice the next time I play this around, the yellow bar indicating our gain reduction is only being activated on some of those heavy strums where I'm hitting the low E string. That's all that low end buildup that made its way through past the EQ. So take a look at that. After compression, I want to add some ambience, I want to add some reverb. So I've set up an effects track in Presonus Studio One. You can set this up with Ascend. Most modern DAWs are going to be able to do the same thing. And it's going to what's called room reverb, and I've got their cold cellar section set up. This is a preset, and it's very familiar. Sounds to me like a chamber reverb. It's giving us almost a dark reverb, but we still need to address some of the high end. So here is the reverb by itself. There is some high-end stuff that we need to treat as well. So we're not gonna leave it at this cold cellar setting. It's got a 1.1 second reverb time. It's got some fluttering happening around. You can look at the screen, copy the settings if you need to. It's basically a hall, medium hall setup. So if my main acoustic guitar track is hitting about that -18 region, my reverb is about -9. So the fader for this reverb track is at -9. But the main thing you noticed is that this reverb has a lot of high-end, crispy pick attack sounds, and I don't want that to be in my reverb. So I'm adding a high shelf, but this high shelf is actually cutting out that high-end flutter. So here is my reverb before EQ. And here it is with the EQ on. It reminds me when you're in a stadium and you're walking through the hallways around the main arena area. It's a very short reverb, but let's listen to it now in context with the rest of the track. Now this is going to be song dependent, but if I have an acoustic guitar track that is dynamic as this, I've got the heavy strumming at the beginning and then it goes to picking, just take a listen because this might be a section where you're doing a little too much mixing with your eyes. Visually, when I look at the screen, I can obviously tell this section here looks a lot quieter than the first section. But let's just take a listen because it may not be that much quieter. It all depends on the context of your song. So if I start adding drums, if I start adding bass guitar, what I would recommend doing if you really need to adjust the settings is take a slice tool. So Presonus Studio One, this is hitting 3 on the keyboard. I'm gonna find the section where we start finger picking or we start plucking the strings. I'm gonna take a slicer and I'm gonna drag this thing down. So now I've got 2 acoustic guitar tracks. I have the one that's set up for strumming and I've got the one that's set up for picking. Not only that, but in Presonus Studio One, you can click and drag all of your plugins over and it will take not only the plugins over, but all of the settings. So the first thing I would do is go to Mix Tool. And now that we're on the picking section of the song, I'm going to adjust the gain for this so that it is more evenly matched to the strumming. So let's hit play. So as you can tell, I've already added 16 decibels of gain, but let's listen to that transition now between the strumming acoustic guitar fully mixed to the picking acoustic guitar fully mixed. Still sounds good. It's probably a little too loud, so I'd probably bring off the gain maybe around 14, 13 or so. Now we can listen to that transition again, see how much more dramatic it is. Hope you enjoyed the video and got something out of recording and mixing the acoustic guitar. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section of this video, and be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons so you don't miss out on any future videos. Thanks for watching.